Okay, I see that we have some audience has joined us, so maybe we can start in a minute or so. Okay, looking good. Maybe we can go ahead and get started if everyone's ready. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Well, welcome and thank you so much for joining our investor fireside chat hosted by Life Science Nation. My name is Joey. I am a senior investor research analyst at Life Science Nation, and my colleague Momo here would be hosting and moderating the session with me. So Momo, maybe quickly introduce yourself if you like.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Momo Yamamoto, and I'm also on the investor research team.
Great, thank you, Momo. And for today, we have four wonderful panelists here today joining us, who are all active investors within the health, life science, and healthcare space, focusing on the early stage investment. And we do have a very diverse group here today. I think everyone is dialing in from a different city or a different time zone. So I think that we will have a very interesting discussion for today. So to kick it off, I would like to just quickly introduce our firm, Life Science Nation. So to kick off the session, our firm Life Science Nation is the Boston-based company. We are specialized in connecting early stage life science and healthcare companies with investors and strategic partners that are in the same space. We curate a investor database platform that tracks over 3,000 active life science and healthcare investors in the space. And we are also the organizing body of the Resi Conference Series, which is one of the largest partnering conference that focuses solely on early stage C2 Series B life science and healthcare investments. And with that, a quick shout out to our upcoming event, which is actually next week. This would be Resi Europe 2024, taking place in person in Barcelona on June 17th. And the following 2 days, June 18th to 19th, would be for virtual participation. And I know some of our investors and panelists here today will be joining us either in person or virtually at this event. So quick shout out that this would be a great opportunity for any early stage startup or investors to meet, network, and learn from each other next week. So I'll put some more information on that in our chat just for everyone's reference. Okay, so with that, let me come back to our session a little bit. So for today, we're happy to join by a few investors that we know to talk a little bit about just how things has been going on the investor side for the first quarter of 2024. And then we would also like everyone to kind of give us a overview of, what are some, investments that you've made so far, or what are a general landscape that you have been seeing for the first half of 2024. And then we would also like to talk a little bit about the future outlook. So what do you see or what do you foresee coming up, any major trends in the rest of 2024, and any, adjustment in your strategies, anything like that. So with that, since we do have a very, very diverse group, I think in terms of geographic focus and also, sectors and subsector of interest. So I would like everyone to maybe just give us a quick introduction. So maybe what's your backgrounds, and give us an overview about your fund, and also if there's any, significant investments in the past that you like to share, anything you would like to talk about, basically.
Should we go around the table? I can start just
okay,
to get
I
the ball.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Farzad Biswat. I'm a senior partner at Sarsi. I was actually one of the founding partners of the fund. We started out back in 2006, and I lead the life science initiative of the fund. We have invested in 22 in total prospects. We have 3 IPOs, 1 trade sale, actually 1 ongoing US IPO. So it's gone not too bad for us, basically. We are actually working on our 4th fund currently, which will be a innovative medicines fund. And we're hoping to have that up and running, hopefully early next year, if we're lucky, late this year. Our sweet spots, I suppose we can come back to that later on. I myself, I'm a pharmacologist by training from Edinburgh Med School in the UK, and I did my postdoctoral training here at the University Hospital in Bergen. I'm actually located in, I think I mentioned, in Norway, but our footprint, hopefully with our fourth fund, will be on the whole in Nordics, but we are going abroad beyond that to Europe and even farther afield if the opportunity should show itself. So that's me.
Thank you, Farzad.
Sure, I can go next if you like. So Tom Gibbs, very happy to be on this panel. Thanks a lot for the invitation. I work at a fund called Debiopharm Innovation Fund. We're the strategic investment fund of Debiopharm, whose logo you can see behind me. As a word of introduction for Debiopharm, we're a oncology drug developer. That's our core business, and we set up the fund 15 years ago to invest in technologies that will impact us as a drug developer. About 8 years ago, we pivoted the fund and started investing exclusively in digital and data-driven technologies, with really two objectives. One is how the cancer patient journey will change with digital tools in addition to medical or surgical intervention. So how can we follow patients? How can we monitor patients? How can we bring the patient voice into clinical decision? That's one aspect. And the other aspect is about how drug development will be transformed by digital and data. So, and I think we all know the pharma industry is dearly in need of being improved. So in terms of efficiency, having better, more positive results, being more cost efficient, being quicker. So that's kind of our investment thesis. We're a seed and Series A investor. Been doing this for quite some while. We've invested 30 companies, of which 23 in the digital health space. We've also had an IPO or two and a number of exits, but nothing particularly flagrant that I want to tell you about right now.
All right, I guess I'll hop in next. My name is Jenna Aronson. I'm a principal on the investment team at Two Bear Capital. We are an early stage investment firm, and we invest all the way from tech, networking, cybersecurity, information security, all the way over to therapeutics, which is kind of the area I tend to put most of my energy towards. Although we, are very interested in how AI and tech can enable progress in healthcare. So definitely some synergies with other investors here in the group today in terms of how we can deploy new ways to use data to, improve efficiencies or move towards better, cures for patients. So we have been working out of a $250 million fund. We tend to invest at the seed Series A stage. We're very active and involved investors, so we lead or co-lead all of our deals and take board seats. It's very important to us that we feel like we're able to offer more support than simply financial. So we want to make sure that we're the right partners to help you work through all of the challenges that you're going to face, and in the journey to build your companies. And so, as a firm, we tend to focus our energies in the immunology, oncology, and neurology spaces, therapeutics. But we're certainly open to other areas as well. I'm based in the Cambridge area. We also have offices in New York, San Diego, Bay Area, and then up in Whitefish, Montana. And we do tend to like platform approaches. We don't really invest in single asset companies with a binary risk profile. So we take I think a very generous, inclusive definition of what a platform can be, but we like to see that there's at least somewhat of an independent risk profile amongst the various programs that a company can be working on. So my background is I trained as a neuroscientist, did my PhD at MIT in the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences. Also worked in research at Mass General Hospital, developing models of Alzheimer's disease, 3D human neural stem cell models. And I've been working with the Two Bear team for 4 years now.
So I'll jump in last here. Hi, everyone. My name is Rick Jones. I'm with BioAdvance. BioAdvance is an early stage fund based in Philadelphia, where I'm calling in from. We invest in the Mid-Atlantic region. So if you're between New York and Washington, D.C. along the I-95 corridor, we'd love to hear from you. If you're an early stage company, pre-seed through Series A. We predominantly invest in therapeutics, although we do some medical device, a couple of diagnostic technologies. And for a while, we did some digital health. We still look at digital as well, but predominantly therapeutics. My background is I'm an internal medicine physician. I've had roles in big pharma and biotech, and for the last 10 years in investing.
I should say I come from big pharma as well. I forgot to mention that. So I worked for Lilly for many years. So yeah.
Momo, I think you forgot to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Sorry about that. But it's already June. Thank you, everybody. So we've already survived half of 2024 already. So how would you all summarize the performance of Q1 so far in terms of the technologies that you're specifically interested in and overall within the life science and healthcare space? And please feel free to share any recent investment activities that you might want to highlight or companies that specifically did well this year. I guess starting with Farzad.
Yeah, so we're actually so to look at exciting things kind of turning up. I think really I would say so just to kind of say a little about our what we have kind of been looking for, if you like, our sweet spot. I think it's pretty close to what Jenna was saying, you know, the fields that she was talking about, immunology. I think that the common denominator being immunology, I think regardless of the indication, immunology is going to be relevant. So autoimmune disease, neurodegenerative, whatever, oncology, definitely. So immunology, anything to do with immunology, I think will be relevant. You know, I think I'm pretty sure not only for us, but for any other early stage investor. In terms of what we have, in terms of trends, I would say talking about neurology and that CNS area, it's something that we've kind of kept away from. For I think, you know, good reasons, but now things are kind of starting to turn around and people are starting to give it a second look, including ourselves. So I think, you know, things that we would like to get into, I think is the CNS sector. And that includes, you know, everything from, I would say the less risky part of the CNS field, if you like things like the Parkinson picture, as it were, more relative to, let's say, the dementia, the Alzheimer's things, which are we feel is still a bit kind of risky to go to, even though there is a increasing, you know, appetite, if you like, willingness for people to go there. We are still a bit kind of wait and see in terms of, you know, going in that direction. But it's something that we definitely would like to do more of.
So I would characterize the first half of 2024 as one of where the main focus was on the survival of our portfolio companies. And I'll talk about sort of emerging new technologies, but we all knew going into the year it was going to be a difficult one for fundraising. And I think I've been pretty impressed actually by the creativity and persistence of our portfolio companies and altering their business plans, really refining their approach, and just essentially being able to get through this nuclear winter. We do see things gradually improving going forward, but it really has been one of survival. We actually reserved most of our and we're an evergreen closed loop kind of fund. So we reserve most of our investment budget for this first half of the year for doing potential follow-ons, and we actually had to deploy less funds than we thought to keep companies afloat, and we're able to make a couple of new investments. Hopefully that is going to improve, and we could talk about what the future looks like. But what's happened in the last few months in terms of our interest, we've always been sort of technology agnostic and more interested in things that stand out, whatever field they're in as a way of advancing things in what I think of as step functions, so that it's not just a small improvement, but it's a major change in the way care might be provided. So whether that's through AI or whether it's through some other disruptive technology or just disruptive science with a new target, a new modality, et cetera. I do think it's interesting in the last 6 months, really, that as AI is sort of crescendoed, how quickly things have sorted out. And I think people, it's no longer sort of, at least to us, it seems like something that is something that we don't understand, but we have to jump onto and sort of catch a wave. I think people have a much better idea now about what is going to be AI's role and what is going to be what you have to look for in terms of AI adding value. Almost every company we see has AI somewhere in the business proposal, but frankly speaking, very few of those applications have been of interest to us. We are moving forward with one AI-enabled technology. The other thing that I think is still very hot right now is oligonucleotide approaches, particularly RNA. People are really sort of pushing the boundaries on all sorts of, whether it's mRNA or siRNA, that and the delivery technologies are one space that we're paying particular attention to.
Yeah, I'll hop in here next. So, just sort of, at the macro level, I think, some of the sentiments that have been shared here already, obviously we've been weathering kind of a really big oscillation in response to the very buzzy years of the pandemic. And, it's been a real challenge, but we have seen signs that there's, progress is starting to be made, and there's sort of some light at the end of the tunnel. We can see that, there have been, some successful IPOs, and granted, those are, in sort of safer markets and for well validated targets and for folks who have very strong sort of public market investor base. So I would say for the least risky types of IPOs, we're starting to see that there's some possibility there, and that's a good thing because that allows access to capital for some of those companies that then allows shifting of capital towards other earlier stage investments in companies. That said, I do think that there's still sort of a little bit of a maybe a barbell type of approach right now in terms of macro trends in VC investing, where you see folks that are excited about very early technologies that don't necessarily require a very large check right now, and then perhaps by the time they've de-risked and reached a few more inflection points, the macro climate might have improved somewhat. And then of course there's the other side, which is you have some clinical proof of concept. And what we've seen is that, for companies that can get a clinical proof of concept, whether it's, a phase 1B or phase 2 readout, there's an enormous appetite from pharma for acquisitions and, and or partnering in that space. And so we're seeing a lot of, M&A activity from pharma folks, and also perhaps maybe a little bit of a delay, an interest in waiting to see that clinical proof of concept and then being very willing to, write a larger check, after that additional de-risking. So I do think it means that, for those of us who make investments in earlier stage companies, that, we have to make sure that we reserve the follow-on capital to help our companies, get through sort of that in-between space. And at Two Bear, we absolutely do that. And it sounds like, Rick, that, you've been doing that to support your companies as well. And so, there's we're hopeful for the future, but I think it's still going to be a journey before we, get back to a place where we're seeing, a more open IPO window. In terms of what we've been looking at and seeing in the first half of the year, I'm excited about the neurospace. I'm hopeful that this progress that we're making in understanding sort of the genetic underpinnings that can subsegment patient populations, that we really can get closer to genetic validity, that the therapies that we're developing are going to be effective. That's going to be really important. And then also the corollary to that is as the biomarkers can help us with patient selection and also monitoring in clinical studies. And I think all of that will really help us drive progress forward in the neurospace. And there certainly have been some setbacks in the neurospace in terms of some CRLs and disappointing clinical trials and whatnot. But we're making progress forward, and it's great to see that there's some enthusiasm from folks who haven't necessarily invested in neuro in the past moving into the space. Immunology is definitely a big area right now, and we're seeing a lot of interest with all the GLP-1 therapeutics and that whole space as a category. I do think that there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and innovation around the RNA space as well. We're seeing a few companies that are doing some really creative approaches to target diseases with new ways to use RNA. That's definitely an area of interest. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it there and hand it over.
I guess I'm the last, right? So what more can I add? I mean, I think Rick and Jenna particularly, you covered the dynamic. I think I just had one thing that apart from simply keeping follow-on money, it's been last year was tough, and this year's so far not so much better. I think we're optimistic. I think the second half of the year will be better. But the companies that are in the most trouble are the ones that took some internal bridging or convertibles last year and now are running out of money and have to go back to the same investors to get some more money, and that's a hard sell, right? Many investors don't like putting one loan on top of another loan unless there's clearly light at the end of the tunnel. So I think that's a situation that's a bit complicated. Another thing because we're investing in picks and shovels, not in therapeutics, or our mothership does therapeutics. Many of our companies work with pharma, and last year was a very tough year for people working with pharma because most of the big pharmas were restructuring, laying off people, putting their budgets on hold more or less, pushing out big orders and stuff like that. So at least in our side of the business, as I say, the people who are essentially suppliers to pharma technologies, many companies had great trouble building their revenues last year because of pharma putting a lot of stuff on hold. So that combined with the tough raising environment, I think we're going to see some train wrecks this year, unfortunately. I mean, just generally in the industry. As far as what's interesting us, actually, our first half, we've only done a couple of seed investments. That's not by design. I think we've been very busy with our growing portfolio. Last year, I think we did 7 investments, so we have plenty of stuff to keep us busy. Areas we're interested in, I heard the mention of AI from several quarters. Many of our companies are using AI, right? Because they're technology suppliers using AI, for example, machine vision to find new biomarkers in pathology images or medical images. We invest in a company using AI for helping to write clinical trials protocols. So essentially scouring the landscape of regulatory information and other protocols that have been out there, what works, what doesn't work, and this can give you a guiding light when you're writing new protocols. So it's a classic AI copilot. I say classic AI copilot seems to be all the buzz these days as far as a word. I think that's about right. I don't think the initial buzz of AI will do everything and take your job away. It's turning into AI will be your friend and help you with your daily job. So it's, I think a lot of positioning is coming out now that they're AI copilots. So those are areas we're looking at. Then a little further along, I think we're doing a bit of landscaping this year and some technologies that may interest us. One is use of LLMs, so large language models, throughout the drug development process. So where technology is popping up, where you can use LLM approaches like ChatGPT. But maybe it's not obvious, but these are not ChatGPT. These are trained on very specific data sets, which make them useful in these highly technical subjects. Another area that interests us is ADCs. I mean, the therapeutics area, ADCs are big news in cancer, at least. And so we're interested in digital technologies around ADCs. There's a lot of ADC companies around. There's very few developing platform tech that can help you better design an ADC or a bispecific, or design a linker, or make the linker payload, a better choice. So that's another area we're interested. And then clinical trial technology is a perennial one, because where does pharma spend most of its money? It's time. And where do they, lose time and money, I should say? It's in clinical trials. So if we can find better tools to onboard patients, to expose patients and their doctors to the potential of clinical trials as a therapeutic option, to improve the efficiency of running the trials, to stream the data instead of having it manually copied, which introduces errors and takes time. There's a million places where we can help in clinical trials. What would be nice would be have more platform approaches, but typically they're point solutions, and someone's going to roll a lot of these point solutions up to make a kind of integrated digital CRO type approach. So that's a little perspective. I think things are improving. I just came back from Munich, where I was at the Health.Tech conference. All the investors I talked with, pretty much without exception, were feeling more optimistic. Certainly more optimistic than this time last year, and more optimistic looking forward to the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for sharing what you've been seeing for the first half of 2024 so far. It seems like there are some sentiments that we all share, and some general observation that everyone has been feeling the same thing for the first half of 2024. So next questions from us is that so with all of that, what are you foreseeing in the second half of 2024? And has your investment decision been changed or adjusted of any sort going forward with all of the things that we've mentioned so far?
I can start maybe. I think there's a general prudence settling in. Certainly in the later stage investment, it's all about whether you can make revenues and what does EBITDA look like, so top and bottom line. And I think this is, at least my perspective, it's trickling down to us at the earlier stage as well. Again, we're not doing therapeutic development, so therapeutics, as I think Jenna said, can be rather binary if it's a single asset company or it's a platform, but it's a long haul, takes a long time to generate proof, and revenue comes much further down the line when someone buys the asset or when you get to the market. In the tools area, well, I guess we're lucky in this that product life cycles are much faster, and so we can expect, or we can push to see revenues even at the Series A stage. So typically when we look at a Series A company, we're looking for a late stage pilot or early customer interactions. And I think with the environment that we've had, we're going to be looking more for companies that are already generating revenue. We don't expect EBITDA positive at Series A, I assure you, but we would like to see some revenue to see that some customers are willing to pay for the technology, which is not only reassuring the technology is useful, but also reassuring that the company can operationally deliver and get customers on board. So that's going to be part of our focus. And other than that, we need to, quote unquote, we need to catch up because we have a certain target for a number of investments. So I think you can expect to see a reasonable amount of activity from us in the second half.
Sounds great. And let's just go backwards. So Jenna, what do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I shared a little, about sort of what we've been seeing, and we don't have a planned, big change in our strategy. I think, we're going to keep exploring the areas that we're excited about, and, keep engaging with, all of the interesting early stage companies. And, at this point, we have taken a disciplined approach to deploying capital, and, throughout the sort of buzzy years of the pandemic, when even if we were interested in a company, if we thought that the round was a little bit overvalued, we didn't participate. And, that's still the approach that we're taking. And so I think at this point, it's kind of a steady state. But, we're out there, and we're, looking to invest in new companies.
Thank you. And Rick, any prediction for the second half of 2024, and how's the investment decision going?
So I think, and I agree with those who mentioned that when you go out, when you talk amongst other investors, there's generally some optimism that things are going to gradually improve, but it's going to be a slow improvement. The metric that I keep an eye on are new funds raised, because it's the new funds that are going to be able to invest in the early stage companies, because they're going to have they have 10 years or whatever it is to return their investment back to their LPs, as opposed to, a fund that was raised 5 years ago and is basically under pressure to return funds very quickly. So, and there's still a dearth of new funds raised. It's more frequent that you see a headline now than it was, say, 6 months ago, but it's still pretty slow. And that's, I'm not an economist, but as long as you can get these higher interest rates on risk-free government bonds, the pressure to allocate funds from your pension fund, say, for another couple points of return, there's less appetite for VC and PE, as long as they can get sort of a goose return from high interest rates on government bonds. So, it's going to take a while as the interest rates come down. People look for return. They'll put more money into VC. That's going to end up providing more money for these early stage companies. In the meantime, there's going to be a huge focus on very cost efficient and very focused sorts of business plans. So you've got to be able to go into an investor, I think, with two major points. One is you have to have clear-cut technical separation that will allow you to stand out amongst all the competition that there is out there. But the second is you've got to have a very clear path to value creation, a very cost efficient kind of way. So nobody's going to invest in a company that has a great idea, but still needs to be, there's sort of this nebulous plan to build out the capabilities of a technology. You've got to have a very clear plan to creating specific value milestones. And it's sort of it's a paradoxical in a way. Platforms are better than single asset companies for sure. But you got to figure out a way to advance that single lead asset because that's what you're going to be valued on, while at the same time putting enough effort into sort of convincing people that there are pieces of your platform behind that single asset that you can mobilize quickly if that first lead asset goes astray. So, I think things are going to be improving slowly, but the focus in this next 6 months to a year is still going to be on, I think, very cost-efficient ways to create value.
And for Zart, any?
Right. So yeah. So I mean, from our perspective, I mean, just to kind of refer back to our previous. I mean, this nuclear winter, as you referred to, Rick, is, I think it's still kind of with us to some extent. And I think one of the things that we've noticed is that reverse mergers, for example, has been one strategy that companies have been using basically to survive, if you like, this winter. But coming back to this question of things to come, as I said, we're actually working on our fourth fund currently, and hopefully that'll be up and running if we're lucky, or late this year or early next year. And in terms of being very prudent and careful in terms of how we pick and choose the cases, I think so basically the stringency has really skyrocketed in terms of what we actually accept. We are asking for a target product profile to a research group who has no concept of what that actually means. But that's how it is. You have to start, with the product in mind. And actually what we say what we're looking for is a platform, technology platform with a showcase product. So basically, and that profile basically has to have value and relevance, not today, but if you're lucky, 6, 7 years, 8 years down the road. So to be able to look into your crystal ball and say, okay, this is going to fly in 7, 8 years time, it's a big call, it's a big asking, but that's the way it is. We given the situation that we have experienced and we are to some extent still in. We have to be very, very stringent. And I think, coming back to your point in terms of the business plans, I think development plans talking about, value inflection points, milestones, which are very crystal clear, the value of these milestones, what they're going to be, how much they're going to cost, and preferably that these will, happen sooner than later, if you like, so that, if it's going to fail, that you will fail early. So, and also, again, just to kind of pinpoint what we're actually looking for in terms of things to come, I think health economics has become much more prominent. So in other words, selecting your patients that will benefit from your potential therapies, it will be continuing continuously more important. So that those and actually in terms of what we're looking for, we're not actually looking for devices. It's purely therapeutics, with the exception of what we've called therapy enabling devices, and that basically includes biomarkers, precisely aimed at improving clinical outcomes, health economics, and anything that can contribute to that end.
Thank you, Farzad. You kind of touched upon this, Rick, you did as well, but I guess in general, a lot of the attendees that are here today are startup companies. From LSN side, we've definitely heard from a lot of startups that it's hard to get in front of investors, having trouble getting funding. I think we've heard that a lot these past few years, but I guess apart from the technology aspect, I know you touched on the business plans and stuff, but what advice can you all give to startups that are having trouble getting funding or that will be looking for funding in the near future?
Yeah, I'll hop in here first. So, I would recommend that as much as possible, get creative and figure out a way to make a warm introduction to investors. We get a lot of inbounds, and it's really helpful if you're able to find a way to kind of leverage your network and help sort of add a little bit of weight to the inbound request to have a conversation. Also, if you aren't able to do that or find a connection, doing a little bit of research beforehand and understanding what the investment philosophy, approach, thesis is for the firm that you're reaching out to is really helpful. I get a lot of inbounds that really are far off scope from what we do at 2Bear, and so it's very clear that it's been a form type of approach, just a launch campaign, and so I'm much more likely to respond to something that clearly seems like somebody had a reason for reaching out to us. And remember, from our perspective, we would love to invest in a lot more companies than we end up seeing. And so we're looking for, reasons that you are the right company for us to partner with. And we want to, understand who you are as a person and as a leadership team, not just the science and the technology and the IP and all of that. Because, from our approach, we work very closely with founders, and, it's important to, set up a dynamic of trust and respect. And so being thoughtful in how you approach the right investors can be, really important. So that's one aspect of it. And then sort of to just carry on a little further with what Rick and Farzad were saying about the approach to or the balance between platform and asset. I think that's really important, because we've seen, in the past that there's just been, a very heavy emphasis on platform when it was very easy to fundraise. And, the reason why is because you can build out this broad platform without having to necessarily get to the next, inflection point in a very disciplined way. And so, right now we're seeing that there are some folks who are prioritizing investments into well-progressed assets. And because, perhaps that risk profile is more attractive to them now. And so, really thinking about which, balancing the approach is important. And I will say that, we like to get involved in these kinds of conversations. This is something that we talk about very actively, in board meetings with our founders all the time. And so I always enjoy, even during the kind of the diligence and get to know you process, when founders, ask, how would you approach this? And we actually have a conversation and get a chance to feel what it would be like to work together. So I could go on, but let me hand off the mic here.
Oh, well, I'll take it next then. Yeah. I think it's spot on what you said. I think the knowing who you're talking to is essential. I mean, we also get a huge amount of inbound because our parent company is a pharma company. We get endless amount of therapeutic assets coming our way. You just have to take 1 second to look at our website where it says we do not invest in therapeutic assets. It's not hard research you have to do, at least at that level. And perhaps to follow on a little on that thought, Jenny, you talked about getting to know people. What would it be like to work with them? You got to remember that when you come to an investor to look for investment, it's a kind of courtship, right? And you may get engaged, but when the investment goes in, you're married, right? And typically this is going to be for a long time. So you want to be a little careful about who you get married to. So I think, yeah, one couldn't say too much about, trying to know your target. So that's one aspect. I think another aspect that's probably easier in therapeutics than is in tools, because it's more obvious, is have a solution to a real problem. So, because we're investing in digital technologies, there's a lot of excitement about the tech. But frankly, I mean, I'm interested in tech, of course, but at some level, I don't care about the technology. I care about solving problems. So if it's AI we need, that's fine. If it's not AI, that's fine too. So I think when you do get in front of the investor, if you can articulate what problem you're solving, then that makes the whole story much, much easier to understand and much more credible for an investment. Because once you know the problem you're solving, then you can think about what's the market size, how we approach that market, what's the product market fit, and all that good stuff. I said it's perhaps easier in therapeutics in the sense that typically companies will come with a lead molecule, and it's pretty easy to see what indication that's likely to fit into, and then you can have a feeling for market size. But I would say having a solution-oriented approach to your presentation is extremely helpful, and makes you much more credible. What else is there useful to say? Don't snow investors, don't chase them too much. We all get huge amounts of email in our inboxes. If you don't get a reply in one day, it's not time to start a blitz campaign of email a day will try and wake up the investor. I think most folk are pretty well disposed, but also have a limited bandwidth, so a little bit of patience sometimes. And then I would advise, and this is a question of personal taste, I'd like a small slide deck that has, I don't know, 5 to 15 slides. Probably 5 is a little on the short side. Sometimes we get decks with 100 slides as an introduction, and that's, we don't have the time. We have so many opportunities. Typically, I think most statistics are like investors invest in 1 out of 100 companies that present to them. So if you imagine for every one of those 100 companies, you read 100 slides, you'd never get anything else done in your days. So think a little about the people's time opposite you, and try and use that in an efficient manner to get a message across that you have a solution for a real problem that you can then build a business on.
Thank you, Tom. I know Rick and Farzad, you already touched upon some key points, but I mean, it's already 10:47, so I guess we'll start wrapping up, but any final thoughts from our investors? Oh, sorry,
Rick,
Rick.
you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I just want to emphasize how critical it is that you, as founders, surround yourself with the talent that's necessary to actually prosecute whatever project it is that you are looking to fund. I just, one of the, probably after geography, which again, do your research. We only invest in companies between New York and Washington, and not in St. Louis or the Bay Area or whatever. So, but after that, it's basically comes down to, is there a team in place to prosecute this? That's question number two. And you might be a first-time founder, and that's okay. But you've got to have people around you that are actually engaged, that will convince us that you can prosecute it successfully. And not just us, because remember, there's no funder that you will, no investor that you will work with likely who is going to be able to single-handedly fund your project going forward. We're all going to have to be part of a syndicate of investors. And one of the biggest things we look at is, not just are we interested in, is this intriguing to us, but what are the issues about that are going to be, that other investors are going to raise? Is this going to be fundable going forward? Do we think there's going to be enough other people interested? And so it's not just a matter of convincing, one set of investors, but really having a proposition that's going to be, you're going to be able to get people around the table. And to that end, I think it's really important to listen to the feedback that Jenna and others have talked about, that when investors have those conversations, frequently we'll talk to a company and say, you're not raising enough money. It's not enough to just get, do another couple animal studies. You've got to get to, some more definitive value creation point. You've got to raise more money, and not because, we couldn't fund the round that you're looking at, but because if we fund it, there's nobody, it's not going to be enough to raise the next one. So take the advice that you get seriously and have that dialogue.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Just 2 words. I mean, basically, if there's 2 things to take away from this meeting, actually, it's one is focus on your product, research platforms and so on. That's fine, but people don't, that they don't cure people. It's the products that cure people in terms of disease. That's the first one. The second one is get the right people on board, because if you don't know what you're aiming for, you'll never succeed.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I guess we will start going into some Q&As. Feel free to just jump in and share your thoughts, but I guess we'll just start with someone who asks, how do you all view companies with non-dilutive funding from organizations such as the NIH? Do you look for these companies, or does it not influence your approach towards investments?
On our side, it's positive, but we don't actively search for those companies. But if they have, then it shows entrepreneurial spirit, and it's it's a good way to kick things off.
Yeah,
very
likewise.
positive.
We certainly see it as a positive. I mean, it shows that there's effort being made to use dollars effectively. There's a limit to it. You shouldn't be going 20 degrees off course to chase non-dilutive funding that's distracting from what your sort of your main focus is. But we absolutely see it as a positive, and a lot of our companies do have non-dilutive funding, and it can be very helpful, especially with the challenging capital formation environment that we've been discussing.
Exactly. And I think in terms of, obviously, we being in Europe, we get other non-dilutive sources of funding, but it's a kind of a confirming, it supports your hypothesis, if you like, from a good institution that would, given that they are willing to support the case, it's good. Yes. Yeah.
Great. And then someone asks, how do you see using safe versus equity raising this year?
I'll just chime in. A lot of people are trying to use safes. We don't like safes because essentially it gives us no real stake in anything. It's just a promise on paper. So we'd prefer that it either be a note or a priced round.
Yeah, that's our approach as well. We don't really participate in safes. Sometimes we'll do that for, bridging our portfolio companies, but we won't use that as a tool to make initial investments, just because of the approach of our style being, that we want to be your partners and, have a board seat and make decisions together. That's just, not a route forward towards that goal.
Yeah, we see safes very early stage, and that's okay because at our early seed investments, we're not leading. When we do a Series A, we typically lead, or we're in the group of leaders, and certainly then it's a price round. We wouldn't usually do a first investment on a convertible unless that was just some way of getting to the price round very soon, and it'd be special circumstances. So for me, safe's okay for very early seed type activities, but after that, I use the other instruments.
Another person asks, may not be relevant to everybody, but what is the investor's sentiment on the highly unmet need in antibacterial therapeutic areas?
That's a very tough one. I can speak for a moment because Debbie Farm has some very narrow spectrum antibiotic programs, which I used to work in the biz dev department and was working on the in-licensing of those things almost 10 years ago when it seemed like there would be a business around there. Big Pharma was talking about them. Big Pharma's interest lasted about 2 years. Meanwhile, we're still developing in clinic. It's a very, very tough business proposition. The world desperately needs them, and we need a different system to pay for the development, whether that's some kind of subscription model for hospitals, whether it's a governmental grant of X million or even billion per molecule developed that gets onto the market and saves lives. At the moment, there's really not a business case to develop them, which is a crying shame from a health perspective.
Someone else asks, can panelists please comment on gene therapy, about how they're influenced by growing number of recent product approvals, and is there any read-through from early commercialization and launch metrics? Also very kind of specific, but if someone can.
Well, my take on it, we've invested in gene therapy and look at a lot of gene therapy companies. Yes, there have been approvals, but I don't think you can point to a blockbuster yet coming out of gene therapy. And that seems to be, we've shown that you can get reimbursement at the levels that they're seeking for very small groups of patients, but no one's shown that you can develop a gene therapy, that's safe and effective for, when you look at huge groups of people, but B, that actually is going to make pharma economic sense. So I think the jury's still out, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's not some of the bloom is off on sort of investment into gene therapy these days.
Wonderful. And I guess I will ask one last question. So I guess I'll change the question a little bit, but if there's one thing that you all can note as a key attribute or accomplishment that can make a company seem extra attractive to your firm in terms of seed or Series A investments, what would that be?
Well,
Generating data. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no,
Jen.
you go ahead, Tom.
I was just saying, generating data. It's data that makes things credible. We're all technical investors. Most of us have some scientific baggage, or at least that way of approaching stuff. So that's what you should do.
Absolutely. I don't think there's just one answer here. I think there are a lot of different things that you can do that are impressive. Certainly we talked about a little bit of the validation and motivation that's proven by having non-dilutive funding. Another great source of non-dilutive funding is partnerships with pharma. And so, if you're going into your Series A raise and you're able to show that you can, successfully navigate that type of partnership at that stage, it'll be early. That's a really good sign as well. well. So, we like to see that, and we're certainly helping a lot of our portfolio companies navigate, conversations around partnerships and BD. So that's a good validation. And another thing is, we often hear from folks who may have been too early, and then they come back at a later round. And so something that's, really wonderful to see is when a company says they're going to accomplish something and they have milestones and goals, and then they actually achieve those when they come back to you, that's really validating. So, you may get asked, did you accomplish the things that you intended to do, in the last 6 months or year? And if you have, that's a really great sign.
From our perspective, what would compel us to go into a case, I think we've touched upon it in terms of having someone in front of you that knows what they're talking about. So in other words, what that means is that, if you have someone who, so obviously there are many things, but you take it as a given that the value proposition that they're actually talking about is an attractive one and is valid and relevant. Given that, then there are so many other things that have to be in place as well. But I would say the one thing, if you take that as a given, the one thing which is for us very important is that the person who's going to take this home preferably has done it before, and also that they know, as I said, they know the pitfalls, they know what their, the expectations and so on and so forth. Again, it might be a big asking, but I think if during the past 20 years, when we look back, the one thing which we always thought we could have done differently, because it's always a question of financing and, where should you put your money in terms of getting the case to fly. And it always, without exception, seems to fall down that we should have had a better caliber of management in place in the early stage to take the case forward. So from our perspective, that is the one thing that is important.
Rick, do you want to share something just short and sweet?
Yeah, I was going to talk about team, but let me talk about one other critical thing that it's sort of it's more of a negative than a positive, I would say. Just don't go in unaware of your competition. We see so many companies that say, oh, well, have this great molecule, but they don't acknowledge the other people, sometimes not even the other people going against the same target. But, for us, it's also important to look at other things that will be used against the same indication. So your competition, you have to be able to have a convincing case that you will stand out. And again, it's 5, 6, 7 years down the road against the people around you. And if you come in sort of acting as if there is no competition or you're the only game in town, that's a big turnoff.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Yeah. Well, that wraps up our webinar for today. Rick, Farzad, Jenna, Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. Attendees, this webinar will be shared with you in a recording, and it is also not too late to sign up for Resi, whether that's in person or virtual only as well. So we hope to see you all there. All of our investors, we hope to also see you in the near future as well. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one, everybody. Bye.
Bye.